This week on Peaceful Co-Parenting Podcast.
That was really a turning point in my case when I started looking at this through the lens of strategy. It really does come down to who the judge is, because you get to, know who they are, know what's important to them. If I found a case that I was kind of following or observing, I'd go out into the computer in the courthouse and read every single filing, every motion, because that gives you so much insight into who the judge is and how they rule and what things matter to them.
Welcome to Peaceful Co-Parenting Podcast, where we discuss strategies and tips to improve your co-parenting situation, especially if it's high conflict. I'm Bianca Ballo, co-parent, mother, and entrepreneur, creator of Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger app, and believer in turning challenging situations into something positive. This week, we're joined by Tina Swithin, and we're talking about the family court system. Tina's take on its effectiveness, some of the potential problems you may face if you end up in family court, and how it could be improved. It's going to be a great episode. Let me introduce Tina. She's a mother and a survivor of a mentally and psychologically abusive marriage. She worked hard over 10 years to terminate her ex-husband's parenting rights. She's now devoted to bringing awareness to what she calls the broken family court system and to educating court professionals about personality disorders in relation to divorce proceedings. You may have heard of Tina. She's created a huge movement called One Mom's Battle that's been featured in Glamour magazine, LA Parent magazine, the Huffington Post, and the Washington Times, among other publications. Tina, it's an honor to speak with you. Thank you for being here.
It's an absolute honor to be here. Thank you for doing this because it's a topic that really, really needs, a light shined on it and people coming together and communicating. So thank you.
Well, before we get started, tell us a little bit more about you.
So I started my family court journey in 2009. I had to represent myself due to financial abuse. I'm the person who avoids conflict at all costs. And so to find myself in such a heightened state of conflict and having to act as my own attorney was the biggest challenge of my life. And I refer to myself as the accidental author and family court advocate because I don't know that anyone would choose this path. It's been a very interesting one. And, I've kind of seen a lot of the problems along the way in my own case. And now over the past 10 years, I've really seen, that I was not an isolated case or situation. When I started my blog, One Mom's Battle, I truly believed I was the only person in the world going through something like this. And so to be connected with tens of thousands of people all over the world, this is beyond just an issue that the United States deals with. I have yet to find a court system that really has it figured out. And so I've kind of found myself on this path. And once I was successful in protecting my kids, you have those thoughts, why would I want to keep doing this work? And, this would have been a really big chapter to just close and go forward because I am remarried. I do have peace. My kids are in a really good place. But the way I see it, I do feel like the journey I've been on has had purpose, and you can't unsee and unhear and unknow all of the things that I've experienced over the years. And so I'm, continuing on this path to raise awareness of the issues within the family court system.
So how long has it been since you feel like that chapter closed personally?
Well, it's been officially, my children were protected by the court system in 2014 when the judge terminated his parenting time. But he still maintained legal custody of my kids, so we were still connected. But for the most part, we've had complete peace for many years. And then in 2019, I took it a step further and terminated his parental rights. And then in 2020, my husband, Glenn, adopted my daughters. And so, it's kind of been a progression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does sound like that. So, what is your advice to co-parents about using the family court system?
If I could go back and do it over again, the importance of strategy. I know myself and so many others that I talk to, we're guided by emotion. Nature intended for us to protect our kids. And when you walk into the family court system, especially if you're dealing with a high conflict individual, it becomes a platform, a new platform of abuse for them. And so I felt as though nature intended for me to protect my kids, and that's what I was driven to do. But the court system ties your hands behind your back and you're at their mercy. And when you're dealing with someone who thrives on conflict, someone who's abusive, it's just a new avenue. I refer to it as post-separation abuse. And one of the things I often say is the abuse I suffered during my marriage paled in comparison to what I experienced once we filed in the court system. And so going back to the beginning, if I would have been able to put my emotions aside, and an attorney recently told me the court sees these things as business transactions. That's all they are to them. And so seeing it through that lens, that when I showed up and I looked like a deer in headlights and I'm shaking and crying, those are all very real and relevant emotions. Because for me personally, I had PTSD or still have PTSD, and I had been through a lot, but we end up looking like the unstable ones, unfortunately, when we present like that. And so seeing it through the lens of the court system versus the one we're personally holding is critical. And I wish someone would have shared that insight with me going back to the very beginning.
Oh, I'm sure that must have been so difficult because, like you had said, you didn't have legal representation, and many times you could rely on your attorney to present in that business-like manner. But here you are acting as your own attorney and still trying to maintain composure in a highly emotional situation. And I don't know if you have any legal training, but I'm sure that was like terrifying to go into court and be representing yourself.
Right. And, when I look back 12 years ago when I started, just how naive I was. You see those words written on the court documents, in the court literature and website, in the best interest. You believe that they are truly there to put your children first. And that's really not the reality of the court system. And I think that is one of the biggest issues, is that parental rights trump child safety, and so that was a huge punch in the gut for me, was just to realize that, the courts are kind of looking at you both like you're equally responsible for the conflict, which is not usually the case. And they're more focused on being fair to the adults than they are to, prioritizing a child's safety. That's something that was really difficult for me to grasp.
So is the reality then that the whole best interest of the child is just a farce?
I believe, back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, the pendulum was probably swung really far over in the direction of moms. And then, we see the late 70s, the 80s, I feel like the pendulum started going in the other direction. And, we saw the fathers' rights movement start up and really take hold in the court system. And so, I think that the court has lost sight of what should be its guiding, focus and goal, which is protecting kids. It's gone too far in the other direction, and it really becomes about parental rights. And when you've got an abuser or a narcissist or another high conflict toxic individual, and they do see this as a way to hurt the other parent, they're fighting for custody of the kids, not because that's truly what they want, but they see the children as pawns and as a weapon to hurt the healthy parent. And so it just becomes a battlefield. And for so many of us who have been through so much abuse to begin with, when you enter this next stage of the battle, you're not ready for it. And where, so many victims of abuse are just already beaten down by the time they go into this, and they're conflict avoidant by nature, where you've got the other side of the coin, and the abuser or the high conflict person thrives on conflict, thrives on control and winning. And so it's a very uneven playing field in the family court system.
I've actually been in the family court system a bit myself. It's probably been about 3.5 years. And when the judge knows who you are and like recognizes you, that's sad, right? You've been there too much. But one thing I've realized is that they have a difficult job, right?
Right.
They see you coming in, right? And they're trying to assess the situation, and I can see how it's difficult from their perspective. It may take years for them to tease out what the actual situation is and what's going on. Was that your experience?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I do try to share with people, is that I have a different perspective sitting in the courtrooms as a family court advocate and as an observer, because there are times where I'm watching two cases or two people ping pong back and forth, and you leave going, well, I completely understand why the judge gave them 50-50, because I couldn't tell who the healthy parent was. And I think that's where, one of the things I would love to see changed in the court system, whether it's at a legislative level or just, common sense, is perjury. The court system is operating under the mentality that everyone lies, and that's not true. There are, I took the high road at every opportunity, every single crossroad. I was always on the high road. I never lied. I never violated a court order. And the other side, in most of these high conflict cases, that is one of the things that you'll find is a common denominator is perjury. And the court just overlooks it, kind of chalking it up to, well, everyone does that. And that, if they were to pay attention and hold people accountable for honesty, because in a court system where credibility is, or where it's all, he said, she said, or she said, what he said, whatever it is, credibility matters. So much of the foundation of these cases become, credibility. And if they really leaned into that and called people out when they were caught in a lie, or if there were legal consequences for perjury in family court, we might see things change a little bit. It's the only branch of the court system where you can lie and get caught and there are no consequences.
So I'm guessing that each county court system is different, or that each state is different. Do you find in your research that the similar challenges are still there in every single county and state?
Yeah, there are certain states where I see are very problematic for a variety of reasons, but it's hard to issue any type of blanket statement, because some of it could come down to the actual judge. For example, if I were in one courtroom, I would present my case one way in courtroom A. And if I walk right next door to courtroom B, just knowing what I know about that judge, I may present my case completely different. And so it really does come down to who the judge is. For the most part, it's really hard to issue. I have yet to find a country, a state, anyone who has it completely figured out and who I could say, no, they're doing it right. They're prioritizing children. In all of my years of advocacy, I've never found that.
So would you say one of the strategies is to get to know the judge and their history? If, let's say, you're representing yourself?
Absolutely. That was really a turning point in my case when I started looking at this through the lens of strategy. And I would go sit in the courtroom and observe. I would watch how other attorneys, if you shadow an attorney, how they present in one courtroom, and they don't have to know you're shadowing them. But, if you happen to be in one courtroom one day, another courtroom the next day, you're going to see two different presentations. And so really getting to know who your judge is, I got to the point where I knew my judge so well that I knew what his baseline was. And so if I walked into court on a, random Tuesday and he was in a really bad mood, spilled coffee on his lap on the way to work, whatever it was, I would be very open to a continuance. My ex-husband often requested continuances and I was usually against them. But if I got a reading that the judge wasn't in a good mood, you better believe I was going to agree to continue the case to a different day, because you get to, know who they are, know what's important to them. If I found a case that I was kind of following or observing, I'd go out into the computer in the courtroom or courthouse and read every single filing, every motion, try to find transcripts if I could, because that gives you so much insight into who the judge is and how they rule and what things matter to them. If we talk about addiction issues or alcohol abuse, there are going to be some judges, and that's where you see their own personal bias come into play. One judge may really care about somebody who has multiple DUIs or drunk in Publix or whatever it is, and then the next judge may not care at all. And so getting to know your judge would be probably the number one piece of advice that I give to people. There are some states where the judge changes all the time, and then you have a whole bunch of judges to get to know and to study, but it's critical.
Yeah, that's tough. And early on in my situation, we lost the judge that had been following us and we got a new judge, and I was devastated because, like we had talked about, this takes years for them to start to tease out what's really going on here. And so, these are open records, and so you do have access to them. And even during COVID, like in my situation, I know we'll do online court and it's open. So you can get in there, and actually there's these random people in there watching my case, and I'm mortified, but it's totally open to the public and they can do that. So, yeah.
Right. No, and that's been one of the main blessings that, very few blessings that have come from COVID, but it is true. A lot of times when I'm sitting here at my desk working, I'll have a court case going on Zoom on my, as I'm typing away and working, that I'm constantly watching other cases. Because you learn so much. I learn something new every single time I watch a case.
Oh, yeah, that's so interesting because now you have more perspective from what's happening from the judge's standpoint. Is like, because when you just have that tunnel vision from your own case, then you only can see them reacting to what you present. But when you start opening it up, I could see how that'd be really, really advantageous to then start to become strategic, like you said.
Right. Because you do start seeing it the way the attorneys and the judges see it, which, like I said, is a business transaction to them. Unfortunately, these are children's lives. So I don't see it that way, but it is, I know in law school, I've talked to attorneys who say we're actually taught to turn off our empathy switch, even if they have one, which we know attorneys, some of them are highly narcissistic themselves, and they're very successful in their careers. So if they do have an empathy switch, they're taught to turn it off. And that's where this does become strategy for them and winning.
And so you had mentioned that the best interest of the child. I'm wondering about if we were talking about solutions, right, to this issue of where your hands are tied behind your back, or maybe the best interests of the child just aren't being considered. Do you think that having like somebody who is qualified to assess the situation come in, like say a child specialist or somebody to come in and actually give their perspective of what should happen? Do you think that that's a solution?
I'm pretty jaded watching things for the past decade. I think that what happens, even if they started off with the best of intentions and motivations to be child focused, they get calloused over the years, compassion fatigue, and they start to put people on a scale when they see absolute horrific, provable abuse, whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse. It starts to kind of warp their thinking and how they view these cases. And so when a case comes in where maybe it's deemed to be light physical abuse or psychological abuse or emotional abuse, it doesn't even register for them. And so you're put on this scale or this spectrum that is so unrealistic and definitely not in the best interest of kids. And so many of them, I would say the majority, operate under the mentality that two parents are better than one no matter what, which I don't agree with at all. And for me, I come at it from a unique perspective. I was raised by my dad, and because I get lumped into, oh, you're pro mom, and you're just trying to teach people to cut dad out of their lives. That's actually not my foundation. I'm pro healthy parent. And I am incredibly thankful that my dad was the one that raised me. I don't think that someone needs two parents to, I think they need one solid, healthy parent. But so many family court professionals operate under that mentality that two parents is the only way to go. And so they overlook a lot of things. They sweep it under the rug. It may not, my threshold of what's acceptable as a mom is very different than the majority of family court professionals. And I remember one time minors counsel had been appointed to my case, and he was very much of that mindset that two parents are always better. And I remember looking at him and saying, why don't you pack your kids up and send them with him for the weekend then? If you feel he's so safe, why don't you, send your kids with mine and let's see how it goes? And it kind of checked him a little bit because I know he wouldn't have sent his kids with my ex-husband. So I'm not one to, I think the more family court professionals you add into the equation, it is very rare that you get one who is 100% child focused. And that's my concern. Whether we're talking about custody evaluations, minors counsel, it's a broken system. And, I think one of the main issues that we see in family court professionals is they don't have any liability in it. There's no accountability for them. They're showing up, they're doing their job. Their goal is to move these cases as quickly as they can, open them, close them, and get them off their desk. And they lose sight that these are children and these are families and people's lives. And so once in a while, you get that rare unicorn in the court system who is very child focused, but their hands are also tied by the reality of our system, which is very 50-50, unfortunately.
So what you're saying is the courts want you to have 50-50 most of the time.
And I don't believe 50-50 is good for a child, even under, if two parents, healthy parents can figure that type of schedule out and, it's working for their family, it's working for the kids, fantastic, more power to you. I'm not a fan. I mean, I think that's a horrible life for a child to bounce back and forth. And, I use the term live out of a suitcase, and maybe that's maybe that's a stretch, but I know how I feel after traveling for a few weeks, and you just want your own bed, you want your normalcy, and they never have that. I think that's a horrible life for a child.
So just curious, like what would the better plan be then?
If you're dealing with two healthy parents, a weekend schedule, Friday after school through, Sunday night, Monday morning, that depending on the age of the kids, the needs of the kids, I don't like the court system's one size fits all approach to families. Kids all have different needs and requirements, and they're all so different.
Well, you had mentioned, they need two healthy parents. I think where it starts to become difficult is realizing that one may not be so healthy. And then the burden of proof is on the healthy parent then to prove that the other parent isn't healthy. And then here we go. Like, it's like, get ready for the conflict, and that's the reality is the conflict is really what hurts the children. And, like, of course, an unhealthy parent, that is also very damaging as well. So,
And I think we really need research on these issues. Santa Clara University came out with a fantastic study about narcissists in the family court system, and it really lays it out that this is a game to them. It's not about the kids, it's about the conflict, it's about maintaining control. Joan Meyer over at the National Family Violence Law Center, she's producing amazing research to show what happens when one parent claims abuse. And that is truly, in my opinion, one of the missing pieces to protecting kids, is getting additional research on these issues. I really don't have faith in psychological evaluations in family court. They weren't designed to be used in the way that they're being used in family court. That's a whole nother topic in itself, is, the threshold of what's acceptable. Actually getting a diagnosis, even if you were to get a diagnosis that, okay, this person is very mentally unhealthy, whether they're in that cluster B category, that which I tend to work in a lot, is the narcissist, the antisocial personality disorder, sociopaths. First of all, you will rarely get a solid diagnosis on that, because the psychologists are trained to never come right out and label that. They'll write it up as they have high narcissistic traits or high antisocial traits, but that does you no good in family court. And even if you did get a solid diagnosis, there's no research to show what that person does as a parent or how they act as a co-parent. So now you're stuck holding a stack of papers that may give you a diagnosis and, light bulb moment about what is wrong with that person, but there's nothing to show why they shouldn't be a parent. So, you've just spent a lot of money on one of these evaluations that really does little good in the family court system.
so as far as expectations, for anybody who thinks they might end up in family court, or maybe they're already in family court, can you shed some light on realistic expectations for the future of what that might hold for them?
Right. If I could go back and do it all over again, or sit down with somebody and give them advice, choose your battles wisely. If you're, I was pretty good at that very early on, but one of the common issues I see is people fighting over what I deem to be some of the silliest things. And then the courts don't have the time or the bandwidth to focus on what's important, and that's your kids. And so I used to think, is this going to matter in 3 years? That was kind of my check-in. Really, the courts, you have to keep your side of the street sparkling clean. You cannot risk sending an email telling the other parent how you really feel. You're not writing to the other parent. You should be writing to the judge. I actually kept a Post-it on my computer screen for a long time that said, to judge CC, ex-husband. And that was my reminder that, I need to present as my true authentic self. And if I'm writing to my ex-husband, there's all kinds of layers that go into that. and I may not show up, when the court doesn't know either of us and they're looking at our case and both of us, I need to show who I really am. And I know I'm a wonderful mom. I would be an amazing co parent if there was a lotto, because I hate conflict. And I get along well with people. And so showing the judge who I am so they can come to that determination quicker, whether, instead of fighting over why I didn't get the child's duffel bag returned at the end of the baseball season, those types of things just create chaos, and the courts, it creates frustration for the judge. And I'll tell you, if I sit in court all day and watch cases, I want to go home and not hear from anyone for the rest of the night. I just want to shower and wash it off. Their job is to just watch people fight all day. And so choose your battles wisely, and your presentation to the court is absolutely critical. Your kids' lives depend on it.
So is your definition then, if it matters in 3 years, it should go in the consider this as something you might battle with your ex over. And if, it won't matter in 3 years, then, consider just letting it go.
Yeah, I let so many things go. And sometimes, it was, will this matter in a year? Is this going to matter in 5 years? Whatever it is for you, check in with yourself and go, is this really what I want to stand in the middle of the courtroom and argue? I see people spend $3,000 to go to court and argue about, the silliest things, where will that really matter in 3 years that you didn't get that one outfit back that, you bought for your daughter and he kept because he knew it would be a way to push your buttons or hurt you? No, if you want to spend $3,000 to argue over that outfit, I'd rather just go buy another outfit for my child. So, really being clear on that, what is going to matter to the court. And that's where watching court proceedings and really paying attention to that can be helpful.
Right. So for you, you have this successful story. I know it took a very long time, but ultimately you were successful. Do you feel like other people can expect the same success or justice or whatever you want to call it when going through family court?
Every situation is so different. It's hard to, do I see success stories? Absolutely. I see them all the time. I work with clients to choose their battles wisely, to be strategic in their communication, to know what the court cares about, what it doesn't care about. So, everybody's victory is going to look different. And, I'm very much of, I call it the chip away mentality, where if the court starts me off at a 50-50, I know that's not what's best for my kids, and I'm not going to accept that that's, the final. Even with final custody orders, I see them change all the time. And I think it's critical that people remember this is an ultra marathon. And most high conflict, unhealthy people, they train for a 5K or a 10K. Some of them train for a half marathon if they're really covert and keep that mask on tight. But, everybody's definition of victory looks different. And mine was more extreme than a lot. But I was also, he presented very well, blonde hair, blue eye, 3-piece suit, all American guy, and worked in sales. So really knowing who you're up against and what your desired end goal is, and then chipping away at that slowly. The reality is so many of these people fight for 50-50, but they really can't sustain it. So even if the court gives it to them, it's not sustainable for the long haul. And so, but It's a hard question to answer. I do see victories all the time, and that's going to look different for everybody. I do feel that I have a very unique outcome to where the court came in and completely protected my children. I know that, but it took 6 years to get to that point, and 2 custody evaluations and minors counsel, and dozens and dozens of court dates. It wasn't an easy hill to climb to get where I ended up.
So you mentioned that you work with clients. Who are your clients?
I have clients all over the world, coaching clients. And so I consider myself, 10 years ago, there was no such term as divorce coach. And it has evolved over the years to actually be recognized by the Bar Association and a lot of other organizations. And so I work at full time as a coach, helping people to, almost as their strategy partner.
And that's where the high conflict divorce coach certification program, right, developed and came to fruition.
Yes. So I started that a year ago because I could work 7 days a week, 15-hour days, and still not keep up. My schedule right now with clients is booked out a full 2 months. And I've stopped taking new clients because it's not fair to my current clients. And so I started this coach training program. So I could train other people to do what I do, and I can share with them everything I've learned over the past decade of being in the system.
That's wonderful, Tina. That's so congratulations on that's huge.
Thank you. It's such a needed. I became in my career what I wish I had back in 2009 is someone to kind of help me, hold the lens of strategy when I wasn't able to see clearly through it. And so I always say I became what I needed back then.
So as part of your advice for people that might be entering family court is to get a divorce coach.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, no, and we actually have a database of the ones who have gone through our program. It's at myhighconflictdivorcecoach.com, where they can actually find someone who is trained in post-separation abuse and these high conflict situations, because it's so much different than a normal divorce.
Definitely some unique needs. So that's a great resource. That'll be in the show notes. Any other resources that you can share with the listeners that might be helpful?
Absolutely. The Center for Judicial Excellence, they're California based. They're doing amazing work to shine a spotlight on the issues in the family court system. The National Center for National Family Violence Law Center, Joan Meyer, who I mentioned earlier, fantastic organization to get behind. It's her research that we need out there. Jacqueline French-Hetty, she has spearheaded Kira's Law in New York, and Caden's Law in Pennsylvania, Kathy Sherlock. Both of those women have lost their daughters to complete family court failures, and their daughters were murdered. They are out there creating legislative change to prioritize child safety, and we need those laws to carry over in all 50 states. That's where we're going to see change.
Great. So Tina, how can people get in touch with you if they have questions or?
Sure. My website is onemomsbattle.com or hcdivorcecoach.com for high conflict, divorcecoach.com. All of my books are available on Amazon. It's a whole series called Divorcing a Narcissist. And so we have tons of resources.
Thank you, Tina. It's wonderful speaking with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Peaceful Co-Parenting Podcast. I hope the time was well spent and you got a lot out of the episode. If so, please rate and review the podcast. I would really appreciate it. If you're interested in sending me a feedback message, asking a question, suggesting a podcast topic or guest, or downloading Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger as a tool for better communication with your co-parent, go to peacefulparentapp.com or see the links in the show notes. Have a great week, and as always, stay peaceful.